So hello, my name is Christina. I have just finished my bachelor's in biology, and I have a minor in philosophy from the UMass University of Massachusetts Lowell. So over the past months, yes, during the pandemic, I've been working as a companion for the elderly. So this presentation is sort of an accumulation of all the things that I've learned, and all the experiences that I've shared with clients of different ages, conditions, and different stages of life. Um, and so the focus and goal of my presentation today is really to provide different methods and tips that you can use to connect with the elderly through the shared activity of crafting. And if I start looking up and down, it's because I have notes. Okay, so I'm going to be structuring this presentation based on 4 different topics. The first one being why crafting? Why is it a really great hobby to partake in? Second is what kind of challenges and obstacles you might face when initiating a crafting session with somebody with the elderly. Some possible tips that I've come up with based on my experiences to create a successful crafting session, a very fluid one with that stress-free and virus-free. And then lastly, some activity ideas that are alternatives to things that they may already like doing. So why crafting, and maybe the benefits of a hobby in general? The first one being that it's a great way to socialize. If you think of a knitting group, for example, where everyone's just sitting in a circle, knitting together, doing a shared activity together, it's a great opportunity to bond or connect with others, whether it be, having a good conversation while you're doing something, or even just a comfortable silence is sometimes just as fulfilling. These aspects are really important for people of an older age when isolation is really prevalent, especially during the pandemic, and long hours or days, I guess, periods of isolation could possibly be damaging to mental health. So a second reason why crafting is a great hobby and an opportunity is that it can bring forth, I guess, a sense of accomplishment and purpose, when they're learning something new, and it's a great way to grow their confidence and self-esteem when they successfully finish a project with you. Third, it's a really great opportunity for learning. Learning something new is a great way to discover oneself again, and explore, different avenues of self-expression that you didn't have before, even with continued limited, dexterity. And then finally, cognitive stimulation. Learning something new, going through the different steps, adapting to roadblocks that they might have when they're trying to engage in this activity is a really great way to exercise their brain or the brain. And so I just wanted to wrap up this section by saying that, aging, it really isn't a lost youth, but a new state of opportunity and strength. And that was said by Betty Friedan. So what are some challenges and obstacles that you might come across when you're trying to initiate a successful crafting session with somebody older? These are the 5 main ones that I've noticed when I was teaching somebody to fold origami, so folding paper into different shapes. The first one, maybe being the most obvious, is the physical limitations. Sitting straight up for a really long period of time, or they might have arthritic fingers, stiff fingers, that may inhibit them from being able to manipulate material that they used to be able to. So a really good way to, I guess, overcome that, really maybe just get a comfy chair. Second thing is to possibly use a rubber thimble on their fingers, or even wearing gloves. Helps to increase friction and grip if they're trying to pick something off of a table, like flat paper, for example. Another challenge that you might have is memory deficits, especially with somebody who has dementia. So you may find that you'd have to repeat the same step over and over, and they may still not be able to remember it again. So a really great way to, I guess, encourage their memory is to use verbal phrases, so memory cues that you can repeat to help like trigger the memory of the step. And something to keep in mind when you're doing this is that you want to try to preserve their autonomy and independence. You don't want to tell them the answer or to do the step for them. Let them do it. Just give them hints, push them along, but they're fully capable of being able to do it if you're just able to help them. Another obstacle that I've come across is emotional frustration. They might get frustrated that they're unable to do something that they used to be able to do. Or that they see that it's so much easier for you to do, or if you're possibly going forward in the step process and leaving them behind, can be very frustrating. And then that's kind of related to the communication struggle. It may be hard for them to ask for help or to admit that they need to take a break when they're very frustrated. And so that frustration, all these communication struggles, and even the short-term focus at the bottom, I think can be overcome with just 3 major things to keep in mind. And the first one, of course, being patience. When I was working with somebody with early onset dementia, she really wasn't able to remember the entire length of the 6-step model to create this origami flower. And so you're going to have a lot of patience if you have to repeat memory cues or, saying the same steps over and over. And along those same lines is to have a great level of compassion. Give them that support that they need, root them on when they're feeling frustrated, when they're stuck on something, and just being able to have that adaptability to be aware of their feelings, to assess the situation, and knowing when to take a break, when you need to take a break. And another great way to, I guess, reduce all of this friction is to create a welcoming atmosphere. You can put on some music that's really nostalgic for them. Like I used to put on Western music with the woman that I was working with. So I learned something new there. You can have a conversation, or just, again, comfortable silence is something that's just as fulfilling. You don't have to always fill the silence. And I know, the millennial generation, my generation especially, has a problem with that. And silence is okay. You can light a candle, or you can initiate the crafting session in a room that they associate with a lot of cognitive stimulation, or a room that they're really comfortable in. So for example, the kitchen table is a really great area. But if they're comfortable in their bedroom, sure, that's great too. Except most of the time, the bedroom is kind of associated mentally with more relaxing and calming and headspace. And the biggest thing of all is to never use elder speak. Treat them with the dignity and worth that they deserve. Respect them as people that are worthy of being respected and cared for. And so this is the more fun part of my presentation, is what are activities that you can do with them. So I've come up with a list of alternative activities to things that they may already like. And it's an adaptation of popular crafts that people of that generation are already really interested in. So as you may know, knitting and crocheting is really popular. Sewing, quilting, and then different types of paper crafts are really popular with the older generation. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but these are just some things that I've noticed. So a great alternative to knitting and crocheting when they have limited finger dexterity is actually using a loom. So this is, I think, pretty contemporary. I don't know when it was invented, but if you can see at the top left corner, this is actually a knitting loom, and somebody has made a hat out of it using it. And then also one underneath that one is a straight loom for straight stitches. So this one just requires them to loop around the different prongs and then use this one needle tool to then loop the yarn over each other. Another alternative to knitting is arm knitting. So if they no longer have the dexterity to manipulate two needles, you can use your entire arm. And it's pretty trendy these days. Some people have made really nice chunky blankets like in that bottom corner. You could try loom weaving, which really only requires them to go up and down, I guess, the strands of the loom. And if that gets really complex, my tip is just to make it bigger. Get a bigger loom so that they can see all of the different strands easier. And then along these same lines of yarn crafts and string crafts is also making kumihimo bracelets, which was a technique used in Japan to make the cords to tie around their kimonos. But I thought that this was an interesting craft because it uses a numbered loom. So you can use these numbers to take them through the steps of weaving this type of bracelet. And if they're not numerically inclined, you can just change the numbers to letters if they're much better with the alphabet, or they remember the alphabet better than numbers. Next is sewing and quilting. If they're really into embroidering, but no longer have, I guess, that finger dexterity to be super accurate with your stitches, a really great alternative is punch needling. So in the video, it actually uses the tension of the canvas to keep the yarn in place without having to weave up and down the needle. You can try knot quilting, which is the bottom right-hand corner. So instead of having to sew the parts together, you can just cut different strands across the edges and just tie them together to make a really cool blanket. I used to do this as a kid. The next one is rug braiding. You can use old t-shirts and you can cut them up into different strands. And this is a great activity you can do with them. If you hold the strands, they can braid it and do it with you. And it's fairly easy, I would say. There's felt needling, where you kind of use a special needle to tangle the felt strands together to form like little animals or something. This one might be a little bit more complex and dangerous because it is a needle, but I think it should be okay. You can try it because there is a sponge that you have to poke through. But yeah, so using felt needling, some people have made really cute little animals like that alpaca. And it really just requires an up and down motion. And then if they really want to sew and create something, there's always fabric glue. And then lastly, in this category is paper crafts. So again, like I've once taught one of the clients that I worked with to make that flower ball at the bottom right. And if you're trying to teach somebody origami, or really maybe you can adapt this to any other craft, is to have a tangible physical model that they can reference to the left. I mean, as you can see in that picture to the top left. Seeing the steps, being able to manipulate the pieces of paper, or being able to rotate and turn each model allows them to have a reference point that they can, kind of try to navigate and figure it out themselves. Yeah, and if they like scrapbooking, there's always a bunch of punch cutters that are sold at stores. and different stamps so then they don't have to cut the pieces of paper themselves. And then a really interesting one that you can do with them is collaging. So if you sit beside them and you cut all the paper and the different shapes and the things for them and set them all out on the table, they can choose what they would like to use and glue into a collage or a scrapbook. You can say, for example, let's make a book. So let's glue all of these pieces together however you like, and we can write the story together after. And then this is also not really a craft, but I think a really great alternative to physical sports that they used to like doing is using the Wii or like the Xbox Connect. Because one of the women that I worked with was a really avid golfer, but of course, holding a club at 92 is going to be really straining. So, the remote is going to put less stress on their body, but will give them the satisfaction of doing a sport that they used to like doing. Instant photography. So I don't know if anyone knows, but at a lot of stores nowadays, they're selling different Polaroid cameras that print the photo exactly when you take it. So that would be a really good scrapbooking opportunity as well. Candle making is really easy. You just kind of melt things down together. You can have them choose the smells that they want to use, soap making. And slime making is super fun too. Seems very childish, but is pretty satisfying. And I think they'd really enjoy it. And then the last thing I want to kind of wrap up with is the difference between companionship and expertise. If they're wanting to do this crafting session with you in order to learn something new, and they're wanting your expertise to teach them something, then you'll want to probably use all the different, like memory cues and tips that I've said before, finding alternatives to things that they already like. But if they're really here for that companionship, then, if what you're making together is hot garbage, that's okay. Did they have a good time? Was it fun for them? Did they feel fulfilled? Did they feel connected to you? Do they feel less alone? And it would still be a successful, bonding session. And I just want to end with a quote from Maggie Coon. She was a big advocate for the elderly, and she called the movement the Gray Panthers movement. And so she said that there's 6 myths about old age, that it's a disease, that they're mindless, that they're sexless, that they're useless, that they're powerless. And I think the biggest one is that they're all alike. No one's all alike, especially because they've gone through different experiences and much more time, much more living time, I guess, than we have. So it's really important to give them the dignity and the respect that they deserve as somebody who's gone through so much life and has so much to offer still at 92, 102, 87. But yeah, that's it. These are all my citations.